Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Can You Hear Me podcast. I'm Rob Johnson, president of Rob Johnson Communications.
And I'm Eileen Rochford, CEO of the Harbinger Group, a marketing and strategy firm. Here on the Can You Hear Me podcast, we always try to elevate the discussion around communications and executive leadership skills. So with that in mind, we're beginning a periodic series called How They Do It, where industry leaders come on the pod and talk about their leadership style and how they make business decisions. It's going to be fascinating.
And for a little backstory, we've been talking about this for many months about finding, getting a good lineup of people that would come on who really have walked the walk. And so I'm really excited about it because it's not something we thought about, hey, let's do, last week. We've been talking about it for months and now we're kind of getting it going. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, it's a different twist on our show that we've been running for how many plus years now? It's kind of wild to even think about that.
Fourth season.
I know.
But if you're gonna begin something like this, you have to get the right person, a true leader. And we found somebody. She's amazing. Natalie Brown is the CEO of Chicago-based financial services firm Mesirow, and she is our first How They Do It guest here on the Can You Hear Me podcast. Natalie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Rob and Eileen. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, we're always interested to hear how you got to the C-suite at Mesirow. I'm sure everybody is as well. But why don't you give us your background story, your origin story, how you worked your way up the ranks of a very competitive industry? I know we'd love to hear that, wouldn't we, Eileen?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Sure. Thanks. I am from Northwest Indiana, and I was raised by a single mother. I fell in love with Chicago as a young girl and had a dream of moving there and having my own apartment. And so when I went to college at Indiana University, I was in the Kelley school. I tried to optimize my chances of getting a job in Chicago and being able to afford my own apartment. And I was steered toward accounting because of the likelihood of being able to get a job right out of school. And I did. I started my career in public accounting at KPMG in Chicago. I was there for 4 years on the audit side, and I worked primarily for financial services clients. I then went to Kraft Foods, where I was in financial analyst roles for about 2.5 years. I then moved on to Nuveen Investments. Kraft was a great environment, and it was a great training ground for me. But I realized during my time there that I'm more of a small to medium-sized company person and not necessarily a big company person. The bureaucracy associated with a large firm and the pace at which things get done, it becomes a little bit frustrating for me. So I ended up going to Nuveen Investments, and I was there for 19 years and in various roles, in various corporate finance roles of increasing responsibility. So really, when I was there, I just worked hard and kind of aspired toward the next role. And it was a great place to work, a great place to build your career. It's where I established, many long-term relationships and found many mentors. When TIAA purchased Nuveen, it changed the firm to that kind of big company feeling again, where it makes me, not comfortable. And so I looked for a financial leadership role in Chicago and ended up as the CFO at Mesirow in 2018. I was fortunate to be the CFO for 2.5 years. I think quickly I was able to fit in culturally because I was able to be my authentic self and establish relationships of trust. I inherited a very talented team, and they were actually doing a lot of the work that I thought I would be doing as the CFO, which really enabled me to sort of rise up and be more strategic and listen to a lot of the business leaders at the firm and learn about the firm really very quickly. So after 2.5 years as the CFO, I became the president. I was the president for a year, and that was really always the plan. Richard Price was planning to move into an executive chairman role, after a year. And after a year, I moved into the CEO role, and I have been the CEO for the last 2 years.
You're coming up on your anniversary, aren't you, at the end of June?
Yeah, I am. That's right.
Yeah.
Natalie, I've had the great pleasure of working with you and that great team for nearly 5 years. And why don't you explain a little bit, because you touched on it, about, big company, not really my style. Nuveen becomes a big company again, not really your style. Why don't you tell people, the culture at Mesirow is to me is one of the most obvious things. Why is that so important for the firm? Why is that so important for you as the leader of the firm?
As I've learned throughout my career how important culture really is, our culture at Mesirow is intentional. I think it's also driven by the fact that we are employee owned. So an employee owned culture is going to sort of naturally lend itself, I think, to an employee centric culture. So I would say our culture's built around our employees, our clients, and our place in the community and being civic leaders. So, and for me, when I first sat down at the firm, it was very obvious that the people here at all levels think and act like owners. And that was really a breath of fresh air for me, and really just fun to be a part of from the first moment I joined the firm.
Oh, I like that. Think and act like owners. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're fortunate for that.
Yeah. And I totally share your feelings about being more comfortable in smaller environments versus very, very large corporations. What does that feel like, kind of on the day-to-day basis in your role at Mesirow? What does that feel like because you're smaller? Maybe even contrast it if you want to other positions that you've been in.
Sure. So, I'm sorry. I like the pace at which we're able to make decisions. At a larger firm, often there are many meetings that lead to potentially making a decision at the end, right? I feel like at our firm and at a smaller firm, you still have that ability to kind of stick your head into somebody's office and really maybe learn something new, maybe grab another person, have an ad hoc conversation. At a larger company, it's very hard to have an ad hoc conversation just because of the org chart that you're looking at, right? And the people that need to be involved in a decision. Also, what I've seen happen at a larger firm is that oftentimes the org chart and the org structure is the most important thing. At our firm, the people are the most important thing, and we will design the org structure around the talent that we have. A larger firm, they get really wrapped up in what the org chart is supposed to look like. And I understand that it's challenging to manage a large firm, and there are best practices associated with what the organization is supposed to look like. I like it that we can be more nimble and say we might have some people that wear multiple hats, and that's okay because they might have the talent to wear multiple hats. And it might be that one of their roles isn't really a full-time job at our firm, so they can wear multiple hats. So that's kind of what it feels like on a day-to-day basis. And I really do prefer that.
That's great. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It is, actually.
Well, as a fellow CEO, one of the things that, and it's just because I'm in communications and marketing as an industry, for 30 years, I'm really curious about successful leaders such as yourself, and how you use communications in your role. And so I'd love to talk about that. Kind of tell us about your communications style and perhaps even how it's evolved, throughout your career and how you like to use communications in your role at Mesirow.
Great question. So I think it's important for leaders to be adaptable in their communication style. I am not heavy-handed about how my team communicates with me. So I have lots of different one-on-ones with my direct reports, some that aren't my direct reports, and I don't have a specified format that they need to bring to me or communicate with me in. I feel like it's important for me to adapt my style. I can take in information in lots of different ways, and I want the people around me to be comfortable, and I don't want to prescribe how they're going to communicate with me. I'm sorry about that. Should I try to turn off my notifications?
Oh, no, I can't hear a thing.
I can't hear
Okay.
anything.
Okay, great,
You're
great,
okay.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, apologies.
No
I
problem.
think effective communication can come in many different forms. I think it's important to be direct. So I have seen some leaders use kind of questions and asking leading questions to try to drive a particular outcome. If I'm asking somebody on my team a question, it's because I'm naturally curious about what I'm asking and I actually want to know the answer. I'm not trying to manipulate the situation. I think that's important to be very direct in communication. And I think that's how you establish relationships of trust with your team.
That's a really great,
Yeah. Couldn't
really
agree more.
great point. So I want to follow up with that idea, Natalie. And we heard your origin story and where you went professionally. But how important was it for you to have bosses and leaders who are good communicators as you're winding your way up that ladder? And how did that shape your style when you got to the C-suite? You were just talking about asking questions because you're interested in it. Is that something that you saw somebody do, or you thought, hey, that's a really effective way to do it? How important was it to have those great communicators along your career path?
So it's on both sides, right? So I think sometimes I've seen very effective communicators, and you tuck that away in your mind and you say, hey, I just learned something there. I'm going to do that. You've also seen people do it, not well and do it ineffectively and say to yourself, I know that I'm not going to do that. So to me, people can tell when somebody's not being authentic and honest with them. And if somebody's asking you a question that you think is inauthentic and that they already know the answer and they're trying to manipulate the conversation, right? Then that hurts your relationship with them, and that doesn't help build a trusting relationship. So for me, I'm emulating some mentors that I was really very proud of and enjoyed working for. And I'm avoiding communication styles that were off-putting to me because they're likely going to be off-putting for other people too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good example. You do. You kind of pick up these little breadcrumbs along the way, and it all, bakes your own special flavor at the end of the day.
But I always tell people it's important to not only to say, oh, I like that style. I want to incorporate that a little bit into what I'm doing, but to also, you were just talking about the styles that were off-putting to you.
Right.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to put people in that situation, and I'm going to purposely, avoid that. And so it's good to see the styles that work and the styles that don't, and you get rid of the ones that don't, and you embrace some of the ones that do. That's a really good way of thinking about it.
Yeah. And I really think oftentimes when we're feeling uncomfortable, when you have that sort of uncomfortable moment or uncomfortable feeling, that's actually when you're learning. So if somebody said something that put me off or had a communication style that made me uncomfortable, at the moment I was probably upset about it, not even realizing what I was really learning and kind of tucking away for my future roles.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good point.
So everybody's a superb leader when things are going really well for their organization. I think we can all agree with that, right? It's so much easier when that's what's going on. Things are great. I can be at my best. But when we face communications or business challenges, I'm curious, Natalie, how do you overcome those challenges to kind of, and also how do you learn from them? What's your approach to overcoming challenges when you're faced with them? And how do you reflect so that you're taking away those key learnings after perhaps you've worked through the challenge?
Right. Great question. So, since I'm in financial services and my firm is in an industry that's very impacted by the markets, we cannot control the markets. The markets are going to have an impact on our results on a month-to-month and year-to-year basis. Markets are cyclical. And there are certainly some tough aspects of our market right now when we're in an interest rate environment that we haven't been in a long time. And it does create some challenges. But in focusing on problem solving, we have to try to think through what can we control. And how I approach this is really with a lot of listening. I seek out points of view from people who I know think very differently than me. And I purposely do that. And I'm asking lots of questions and I'm doing a lot more listening than I am talking. And I want to make sure that we come up with a plan. It's got to be fairly simple. We're going to do 4 things to try to strategically change our revenue stream. And these are the 4 things, and they have to be specific. And then we have to have a contingency plan if those things don't work. It's okay. I feel like sometimes in a situation like we're in with the markets, there's a lot of hand wringing and a lot of talking, but we actually have to do something. We can't just talk about it over and over again. We have to actually do something and implement something. And what I've said to people from time to time is, let's not be afraid to try something different. We're going to have a contingency plan in place. It might not work, but doing nothing is not okay either. So we've got to try something and then say, we think this has about a 60% chance of working. If it doesn't work, here's what we're going to do instead. And that's how we move forward. And it might sound oversimplified or fairly simple, but that's kind of that's the framework that I think about when I think about problem solving.
Mm-hmm. You think that what you've done is say, take a chance. We have a 60% chance that it's going to work. It may not work.
Right.
Are you providing a safe space to your employees who are now maybe going to have a little more swagger, a little bit more confidence because they know that they're empowered by you to not just sit around and hope that interest rates get better next week, but that you're trying to be proactively problem solving?
For sure. And we need to be transparent about that. So what I say to my team is, give me things that I can point to that you tried. It doesn't matter if they worked or not. It was your idea and we tried it. And it doesn't matter. What matters, what would be bad, what would be the worst outcome is if we do nothing and we just hope for things to change. We're not going to do that. And so to me, it's okay. If what we try doesn't work, the not trying is not okay.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Hope is not a strategy, as we all know.
Hope is not a strategy. We've heard that somewhere before. So let me follow up on when it comes to internal communications and the problem solving. We were just talking a little bit about that. Are there times that you need to lead people away from simply identifying the problem? Hey, interest rates are terrible. Hey, the markets, blah, blah, blah. And instead push them to offer those solutions. So you're talking about, trying something. I think we're maybe talking about the same thing here, but in terms of mindset, how important is that to just not sit there and identify the problem? Because we could sit here all day and talk about the markets not kind of being stagnant, but moving forward and actually getting things done.
Yeah. So I think people have gotten to a place where they know that complaining or bringing problems to me or to their boss or to their manager without a solution is not okay. So I think that's already weaved into our education and our training, and kids in college, they know that. They know they've got to bring a solution. They know that they can't just bring me problems. I do think, though, and this is what I touched on before, there's a lot of talking about the solutions, and it's more of a rare talent to get someone who naturally knows how to execute that solution, right? Instead of just talk about it. So I think sometimes we do, again, too much hand wringing, too much talking about the problem, and even talking then about that solution, but actually implementing the change. Not everybody can do that. And so if somebody really wants to set themselves apart, be the person who actually can implement the change and knows how to navigate that, because I can't always do it anymore in the same way. I can oversee it, but I can't always go to these meetings because it becomes a little bit about me being in the meeting. And that might be a little bit less effective for the team. And so I can help steer the actual execution of the solution. And I can certainly hold people accountable and oversee it. But I need those executors on my team to be actually the ones out there getting it done. And that's a skill set to me that's really valuable. But for me, with regard to offering solutions for problems, people are there. They understand that that's not okay anymore to do, but there's still more to be done after that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Your observation that's baked into kind of our training and education, that you need to pinpoint the solution, but you also need to come with an answer or the problem rather, but you also need to come with an answer for how do we not only dream up the solution, but put it into action.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So as you were describing that, I was thinking about kind of the people who have been even coming through our organization who are younger from college. And I thought, you're right, that I'm totally seeing that much, much more, than even 10 years ago, which is wonderful. Right.
Right. Agreed.
Makes everybody, it's just more fun to come to work when everyone kind of gets that.
Right.
Versus having to kind of like, bang it out. Like, what is it? Let's go, move it forward. Well, what do you think you should do? Blah, blah, blah. Yes.
Ask the question.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Do you mind if I just ask you one question about you went to the University of Chicago, right?
I did.
And in your backstory, you didn't mention that, and I was just thinking, maybe could you tell us a little bit about the impact that
yes.
had on kind of your development? Yeah.
And yes, I certainly apologize for not mentioning that. I went to the U of C night program to get my MBA. I started while I was at Kraft and I finished when I went to Nuveen. So I think sometimes I think about my career in terms of a timeline. And since I was doing that concurrently with some of my roles, it's why I forgot to mention it. But so I was going to school kind of after work, downtown at the Gleacher Center. And I remember I was very proud when I got in. I was maybe 27 or 28 years old. They, tend to want people in the program that have at least 5 years of experience. And that's about what I had. And I was very proud to get in. And I remember walking on the beach with my husband one day and he said, I really think it's time for us to have a baby. And I said, oh, I'm going to go to business school. Just
not now.
That's okay. Because I can do two. I can work and I can go to school, but I can't go to work and go to school and have a baby. So we ended up having a baby a couple of years later. But
good thing.
My time at the U of C was very important to my career for a few different reasons. I think it really was the right time for me to go. I do remember meetings at Kraft that I was sitting in and not understanding what was being discussed at the meeting or why I was there. And that is that sort of pretending that you have to do sometimes when you're earlier in your career can make you very uncomfortable. After I went to the U of C, I would never sat in a meeting again that I didn't know what was being discussed and that I didn't understand. It really took me to the level of being this sort of all-around business person in a way that, undergrad just can't do. So I also think that having my MBA from the U of C on my resume really does it lend credibility to me for people that didn't know me. Coming into a firm as the CFO and not having grown up there, I really think that stamp on my resume helped Mesirow feel more comfortable with hiring me into such a technical position.
Absolutely. I'm really happy to hear you talk about that because it's an incredible endorsement, but it's also just a reflection on your ability as a professional. And it certainly impressed me. So, as I'm sure it does a lot of people.
Right. As it should.
Yeah. And to do it while you're in early stages of your career, like you were in probably a very difficult job that, you're probably working 50 hours a week or more.
Yeah.
And to take that on, it's really is a massive accomplishment. Absolutely. So we love to close out our show with advice. So that's where we're going to go next.
Okay.
Just interested to hear, one important piece of advice that you might give to other folks who have similar roles to yourself. Things, maybe something you learned along the way that really is important to you that you'd like to pass on, or even if you want to talk to, aspiring professionals, you pick.
Sure. Thank you. I actually have two pieces of advice. One would be more for aspiring professionals, and one would be more for somebody who's also already found themselves in a role like I'm in right now. So for an aspiring professional, I would say to really strive to be your authentic self at work and let people see who you actually are. Sometimes I feel like we get a little bit caught up in professionalism that we almost turn into professional automatons. And I do think that part of my success and one of the reasons I was selected for the role was for my trustworthiness. And if I didn't let my peers at Mesirow see who I really was and be somewhat vulnerable and authentic to them, I don't think I would have established the credibility that I needed and the trustworthiness that I needed in order to get the role. So I do think that's one of the keys to my success. And then now that I am in this role, I guess I would say to other leaders, your decisions are going to get questioned. And I would, even though it can be uncomfortable at times, I would welcome those questions and treat those questions, prioritize those questions and treat them very seriously, learn something from the questions, and then also walk people through how you made the decision. Because I'm talking to people that are owners of the firm, my decisions are usually questioned by, board members or other employees. And instead of being frustrated by that, I want them to understand how I built consensus and who I listened to and what other points of view I got in order to make that decision. And that usually gives people comfort and makes them feel better about me as a leader and the fact that I don't take really any decisions very lightly, and how I am thoughtful and I am listening and being careful and creative. So I would say, be yourself and welcome questions is sort of the two pieces of advice I would give.
Bravo.
Well, excellent. Yes.
Thank you.
But I was hearing you say, especially about the questions, almost like questions are little gifts.
Right. Exactly right. That's very well said. That's very well said. It doesn't always feel like that. I'm telling you, it doesn't come naturally to say, thank you for questioning my leadership. That makes me feel great today, right? That doesn't come naturally, but I'm trying to get to a place where, exactly as you said, Eileen, it is a little gift, and it's not an insult. It's a gift.
Yeah.
And I have to say, you were talking about being your authentic self, and having spent a fair amount of time around you at Mesirow, I can just say you always treat everybody the same. And I think that consistency matters. And that's obviously who you are. So when you're giving advice about, hey, being authentic, it's something that I know people that work there day in and day out see on a regular basis. So job well done.
Thanks, Rob. That means a lot coming from you. I appreciate it.
You bet. Well, listen, we are thrilled you joined us today. This How They Do It thing is starting off with a bang. You made it happen. We can't thank you enough. And I know how busy your schedule is, and we were just so honored you spent a few minutes with us today.
Thanks so much. Delighted to do this. It was great to be with you both.
Wonderful.
Well, absolutely. That's going to do it for another edition of Can You Hear Me? I'm Rob Johnson. If you'd like to comment on the podcast or suggest a topic, please contact us at our new Can You Hear Me podcast page on LinkedIn.
And I'm Eileen Rochford. If you like the show, please consider giving us a review on any of the platforms where you get your podcasts. Your reviews will help other potential listeners find us, and we always love to have more people in our community. So thanks everybody for listening.